another episode of the CSL podcast. Here to talk about all the things going on. There's been a lot of activity, even though we build up towards the playoffs in terms of hunt for that final position. Lots of games still to go. And there's also been a lot of activity in terms of general manager changes. So we're going to talk about all of that in this episode. And today I'm joined by two different guests. First one being one of the regulars on the show, the Lakers general manager, Tim. Tim, how are you doing today?
Doing good.
Are you excited for the draft, or are you just waiting for the season to end to get to that exciting, see where you guys fit in terms of lottery and off season?
I'll be excited once I start scouting more.
So you haven't got your eye on a particular player yet, I suppose. Still early days, I guess.
Pretty much, yeah.
Good. And I'm also joined by the Cleveland general manager, Drummer. Drummer, how's it all going today? Are you worried about your playoff position?
Honestly, no, not really. I wouldn't really mind having another lottery pick in this draft if it turns out to be that way. But I don't know. I think my team is still sneaky good, and that with matchups they can still do something. So no, not super worried.
Good. And we'll talk about that later on in terms of the race for the playoff spots in the Eastern Conference and Western Conference. But first thing I think on the list today to have a talk about really is the activity that's happened in the league over the past sort of week and a half, in terms of we've not just seen one new general manager take position up in the CSL, but we've actually seen 5 in total. New general managers coming in at Dallas, Indiana, New Orleans, Memphis, and Philadelphia, which means the league is full, which is fantastic news for the CSL as we look to move towards a new engine. But I thought we'd take some time today really to get some experienced GM's opinion on the new general managers' teams that they're taking over, and see what our thoughts are really. So let's start with the Eastern Conference first, and focusing initially on the Indiana Pacers, who have not got a new general manager. And I guess it's an interesting prospect, Indiana, the team that has had some huge changes over the past couple of years in terms of general manager changes, but they're kind of in an interesting position, aren't they, Tim?
Yeah, they really are. Due to really bad mismanagement by High Grade, who did bow out like I told everybody he would. I'm just surprised he lasted as long as he did. Yeah, he made some really terrible moves. It's a team that isn't completely devoid of talent, though. I mean, I personally don't like Justice Winslow because I hate high scorers with low efficiency. And I think that's the problem that the team has right now is, like I said in the new Indiana GM's article, they've got 4 guys with high or relatively high scoring ratings, none of whom shoot the ball very well. So I think one of the things that they will want to do going forward, I know they're planning on shifting towards a rebuild, is they need to look for efficient shooters or simply do addition by subtraction. Just trade some of these guys who are inefficient to, even out the, get rid of some of this inefficiency and open up spots for players who can actually shoot.
Yeah, I mean, to give the GM who's coming in, apologies, I don't remember all of the new GM's names because there's been quite a few changes, but to give him a bit of a flavour, you kind of summed up there in terms of the previous management team kind of took this team that was a upcoming young team, probably not on the level of Miami or Boston, but they were certainly promising, and over the course of his tenure, changed his teams into trying to get them into a hard-nosed defensive team. And we've seen some positive impact of that for the Pacers, but it's predominantly been fairly negative. But there's still a lot of talent there. I mean, Tim, you kind of mentioned it. There's some volume shooters on there who probably aren't necessarily going to be there long term. I mean, the ones that stand out for me are Brandon Jennings and Justin Harper, probably 2 players who, one's on a contract for a little while, but I think the other one's sort of on another longer contract. But I think they're both not necessarily going to be sticking around there for a while. But I guess the interesting thing is, in terms of the bright spark, is probably Justice Winslow. And I know some people are mixed on him in terms of he is a great defender, but probably not a great shooter. But interested to see what are your guys' thoughts on him? Do you think Drummer? Do you think he's fit for the Pacers going forward, or is he someone they're going to look to cash in?
I think they should look to cash in. Completely honest, I would just go ahead and tear that team down. I think that's one of the ones, like Tim has. I heard him say briefly, was incredibly inefficient, and I just don't think they have a guy on the roster that I would build the entire franchise around at this point.
Yeah, personally, I'm kind of the same way. None of this roster fits together. And I think Winslow will command the highest trade value. So I think once you see, if he decides to do it, yeah, I would personally do that as well. Look and see what's out there for Winslow. And depending on what sort of return you get, if you do trade him, I think that kind of starts determining, okay, this is the direction the franchise is going to go in.
Yeah, I would think you would be able to at least get a first or two from Winslow. I mean, the league really, really values defense at this time. That's the current trend. So I'm sure there's somebody out there that would be willing to make that trade. Like maybe a contending team who's kind of flush with assets would be willing to make a trade like that just to have a lockdown person on their team, as we're all looking to try to defend some of the super talented teams that are coming up now.
Yeah, personally, I think he'd be really interesting in maybe Boston.
That would be. That's actually the first one that came to my mind when I was saying that.
Yeah, I could see him fitting very nicely in Boston in terms of them adding sort of additional pieces to try and get the right when they get the playoff matchups to kind of bring guys into lockdown opposition styles, and he would fit very nicely there. And he is sort of the bright light in this Pacers roster at the moment. I guess the interesting question as well is that they have three sort of, you can call them stars, three starting level players in Oladipo, DeRozan, and Kevin Love, who are all on sort of couple of year deals. What do you guys think about those three? I mean, obviously, if you're going to move Winslow, you're probably looking to move those three. Do you guys think that one or two of those guys should remain?
I think, like Tim was saying, it kind of depends on the return. Like, I think some of those guys are fantastic role players, and if you can get some picks, that are lottery picks, and you have a shot at getting a franchise guy, then it would be smart to keep some of these high end role players around on relatively good contracts. But I don't know. I would, at this point, I would just come in, assess who has the greatest value, try to get as much as I can, and go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I think Oladipo still commands a ton of value because, again, defense is definitely a thing. And when I remember when he was with the Lakers, he was very efficient. Now, I don't know if that was the high press system I was using because I ran FCP with him, but that could be an option. I think like I said, I think he'll command a ton of value. DeRozan is a player who I fixed. And who is super efficient. He's the only really efficient shooter on the roster right now. So personally, my own kind of inclination would be to keep DeRozan unless you get a fair offer for him. I think he's kind of fallen into obscurity since he left us, which I think is unfortunate because, like GM said, he is one of those high-end role players that you can have as a fifth starter, sixth man, and he'll just produce points very efficiently for you. And his defense is not terrible. It's okay.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what you're both saying there in terms of it purely depends on value, but those three guys still hold some good value and hold some real strengths there that will be beneficial for a lot of teams in the CSL. So let's move on to the other Eastern Conference team that has also taken on a new general manager recently, and probably about time, to say the least, the Philadelphia 76ers, who have been massively underperforming this year.
Isn't that them every year though? Except last year when Jabari said, "Fuck this! I'm finally in the playoffs, so I'm gonna go
Yeah,
ham and get us to the conference finals." I think it was, or
yeah.
at
I mean,
least second round.
exactly. I mean, to give the GM is coming in a flavour. I mean, the previous GM had been there for a long period of time, not necessarily kept an eye on the team for a consistent amount of period, which kind of led to the 76ers bouncing in and out of sort of the bottom end seedings of the Eastern Conference playoffs to being a lottery team. Hence why they got someone like Lonzo Ball. And there is a lot of talent on this team. Last year, they got through the playoffs, like Tim said, and Jabari Parker just, he's the star of this team, but he had an amazing playoff series. You could probably see it down the bottom there, but he was shooting 49% and scoring 35.4 points per game, which is, MVP level ability. What would you guys do if you were Philadelphia 76ers GM? Is there a lot you would change, or is it more a case of just keeping an eye on this team for now?
Personally, for now, I would just hang on to everyone. Definitely throw a 5-year max at Jabari Parker. He's the kind of player you don't screw around with. You just give him whatever he wants to keep him. Adrian Payne is a much more interesting situation. He's older. Has I don't even really know how his career has really gone. He's kind of been that underrated second person. I think they also need to keep him. I Their cap situation, I think, won't allow them to go get someone else. So, personally, keep everyone. See how it goes when they're actually being managed for once, and then really look at making any sort of trades, adjustments, not in the off season, but during the season itself. Maybe around the trade deadline, once you have a better sense of the team and where the gaps lie, then that's when you finally start making moves.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you here, Tim, in that Jabari Parker, don't mess around, max deal him, just get that over and done with, because he is a franchise player, and you just don't mess around with someone who can perform like that in the playoffs. The Payne situation is interesting, and I kind of agree with you that you probably do want to keep him around. It's just interesting. So obviously, Mr. Wagner, who they drafted last year, did have a little boost in the recent couple of sims, and it'll be interesting to see how he does if he's being given slightly more minutes, because so far he's performing okay. He's rebounding and scoring the ball pretty well in limited time, and I'd like to see a little bit more from him. But yeah, as you kind of said, this team's just been underperforming, and it's very much a case of status quo. Keep this team rocking and rolling, and there is a good amount of talent on here to make a playoff shout next year. So let's move.
Well, Jam's back, so why don't we ask him about the 76ers as well?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, jumping in and out, but yeah, we kind of just agreed that the 76ers are a team that's underachieved, and there's probably not a lot we would necessarily change with this roster due to the cap limitations and Jabari Parker being so good. But what's your view on it? Okay, maybe we've lost Josh again.
Okay.
But yeah, okay. So we'll move on to the next team. So we've, those were the Eastern Conference guys.
I'm here. I apologize. As I was telling you earlier, man, husbandly duties. But I'm done and I'm back now.
Cool,
Okay.
no problem. So what do you think on the Philadelphia 76ers? If you could sum this team up and what direction you would take them, how would you do about it?
I love the 76ers, and if there is a team that I could, if I ever decided to switch, that would be the one that I would ask for. But obviously they have a GM now. But I believe Lonzo Ball is probably the best defensive guard in the league. And I would say that they don't really have any major flaws that I can see other than three-point shooting. So, I mean, yeah, I think that they could be probably a 50 to maybe 55 win team if they were properly managed. Anyway, I don't know. I really don't have much more than that.
No, I think you're kind of agreeing with what we're saying in that it's minor adjustments, if anything. And if you can just keep an eye on this team as the new general manager, you can turn them around very quickly due to poor mismanagement previously. So we'll jump across to the Western Conference now, and we'll talk about the first one, which is for the first one in the Southwest Division at the moment, are the Dallas Mavericks. So a team that historically has been managed by a long-running GM who left the league, I think, last year. Have always been in the hunt for being one of the better Western Conference teams. Kind of have always been cashing in to try and win the championship. It didn't quite materialize, but there's still a lot of talent on this team. What do you guys think?
I think the Paul George situation is going to be really interesting to watch in the offseason. Like, can you really give him, what he's due? Because he's still very highly rated and probably won't drop off that much. But at some point, he is going to go off to a cliff, and you might be on the hook for paying him $17 million when he's 36. And at that point, what do you do? But I don't know. I think they've still, they've got some assets that they could flip for other pieces. Like maybe you move, re-sign Paul George and you try to move Derrick Rose for value, or some of the other pieces on that team. I think they're in a pretty good spot to rebuild. They should be thankful that Brett actually didn't completely strip them of assets and just vanish. He at least tried to keep it full of talent.
What's their pick situation like?
So I believe I don't know definitely, but I think they hold all their picks now because they weren't traded. I don't think they've got any under pick protection.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they do.
So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, personally, Paul George turns 34 next season. And 34 is the age where things really start getting scary, unless you're Al Horford, who dude must take some serious anti-aging pills because he's aged slower than anybody in the league, I think, even less than LeBron. So personally, I would probably start thinking about the rebuild this offseason. And I would start by looking at a sign and trade for Paul George. As a new general manager, it takes a season or two to really get to know your team. And when your window is literally next season before your ancient team falls off, that's a scary situation to be in. So I would personally think, 2 seasons ahead, sign and trade Paul George this offseason, get assets back for him, and then you've already started prepping for the rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you both are sort of leaning towards the rebuild situation. For me, I think the window would be tight for this team to make any noise, but they've been on such a great run recently. I mean, I think before the trade deadline, they were, a definitive lottery team, but they fought back and they're in the playoff hunt now this year already, which to me screams that even if this team stays as status quo for next year, they should be a solid playoff team. I guess the question would be that, if you guys are kind of thinking sign and trade Paul George, I mean, I guess how much value would a sign and trade for a 34-year-old Paul George be? I mean, we know that age kind of ruins values for players in DDS and in CSL. Do you really think they would get any decent return from him?
Well, 2 things. If you could go to the the Mavericks schedule real quick, I want to point something out. Recently, they had a run where they went against all of the top teams in the West, and they got blasted by all of them. And I've been watching that, and I really think that that's not going to get better if you. So at this point, they kind of have to rebuild. And after hearing Tim, some of the things Tim pointed out, maybe your best bet is a Paul George sign and trade, because again, there's contending teams that have assets that might want a Paul George to extend their window. He may only give Dallas a 1-year window, but he can give some other teams maybe add a year or 2 to their windows, but depending on how slowly he drops off. But I just wanted to point that out, that that this team has talent, and he managed to turn it around for maybe about 10 games. But within when they had that stretch where they went against literally all the top teams in the West, I don't think they beat a single one.
Yeah, so it's a little bit smoke and mirrors there in terms of their heat. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, let's just have a look at that. So, if I just quickly scan through, so I mean, in terms of just the Western Conference teams, they've kind of played over the past month. They kind of have beaten Sacramento a couple of times, I think. I know they've gone 1-1 with Sacramento. They've lost to Denver. They beat us, obviously. They kind of lost to Golden State, so it's a bit of a mixed bag. And
Well, remember, Sacramento has been going with their B lineup to preserve the health of the players for, excuse me, the playoffs. So that win has an asterisk to it, I think, unless you look at the box score to see, who was playing and what sort of minutes they were getting.
And if you look at just other top teams they played, they lost to Denver, they lost to Toronto, they lost to Miami, they lost to Phoenix. Like they there's no type of retooling I think Dallas could do that would put them up above the powerhouses in the West. So, I mean,
yeah, I mean, I do see where you're both coming from. I guess my question is that with this team aging, the value of players might be a bit sketchy, and it might make it quite difficult to turn this team around quite quickly if they do go for a full scale rebuild. That would be my only concern as a Dallas GM, really.
Well, but some assets are better than no assets. So you might as well start taking the poison pill this off season. They've got all their own picks, so there's nothing to worry about there. It's the time that because otherwise, what happens if you don't deal these guys? They top out as a mid-tier, late seed, somewhere between the mid-tier and late seed playoff team. Maybe they win a first-round matchup, get to the second round, but essentially that's about it. And then when these guys finally do, when they fall off the cliff in a season or two, if you've gotten nothing for them, then you're starting over with nothing.
Yeah, no, it's fair. It's fair. I agree with what you're saying. I guess that's the big deciding question for the GM. I mean, if he feels that he wants to keep that window open for a couple of years and keep the Dallas momentum of, well, we're going to try and win something with Paul George, then he can go that way. But I guess the other option is that he can cash in now whilst there still is some value and build the team up in his own image, his own style going into the new engine, which could be beneficial as well. So if we move on to the other team in the Southwest that has a new general manager, that is the Memphis Grizzlies. Another team that's probably been underperforming based on the talent. What are your guys' take on the Grizzlies this year?
I like the Grizzlies roster. I think that they're probably a two-way scorer away from being like an upper echelon team. Zach LaVine is really good at scoring, but he gives up exactly what he gets you. So it's kind of a net negative. It's like as I was saying, I think in the Facebook chat, I think he could probably be the Lou Williams of the CSL if he was paid appropriately and GMs didn't seem forced to make him a starter or just constantly put him in that role. I don't think we've ever seen him on a team where he could just be surrounded by good defenders and just score. And the Grizzlies are in a better position to do that for him than anyone else. So, maybe you hold on to him this offseason and you just keep stacking up on defense. I don't think they're in too bad of a situation. So, and I think they have their own picks too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's a good point that you bring up about the new engine because, one of the things that, excuse me, happening with the new engine is for the first time in the series, individual defensive assignments are a thing. So what that does is opens up opportunities for guys like Levine, whose defense is so terrible. I could score on him, and I was a defensive specialist who couldn't shoot when I played basketball. Um, you'll be able to hide him better because you can just defensively stick him on whoever the shittiest offensive player on the other team is. So I think that, even though we were talking and we were saying his value is probably about 6 to 8 million, that's his value in a DDS3 engine. In the DDS 19 engine, where we have individual defensive player assignments, maybe his value goes up to about, maybe 8-10 million then. So, maybe he's one of those guys who, because of the engine switch, he becomes much more valuable because you can hide him much more efficiently in the new engine.
Yeah, I think that's interesting take. I guess definitely in the new engine, his defense can be hidden very well. He is a player who splits opinion at the moment in the current engine. I guess I kind of agree with you both that the Grizzlies do have quite a lot of talent that I personally quite like. I mean, I like Biyumbo, I like Bogdanovic, I like Middleton. These are guys who are effective and do bring a lot on both sides of the court. I guess I'll be very interested to see how Middleton does in the new engine because he is, your stereotypical 3-point specialist, and I can only expect that his 3-point attempts will go up in the new engine, which will probably help him as well. I guess just to give you guys a sense, you both mentioned about the pick situation. So this year they currently don't have their own pick; they have the Warriors pick. But obviously going forward, they do hold their first round picks. So again, a nice situation for a new GM coming in that they have immediate talent with good contracts, good ages to build a team around. So you don't necessarily need to do anything too drastic. Do you guys feel that the Grizzlies should be a playoff team, a definitive lock in the Western Conference going forward with a GM looking after them?
Well, yeah, with the drop off that's going to come on in teams like Dallas, and I think that there's definitely going to be an open spot for them. Maybe Utah will be ascended and will take that spot. So that might be a little bit harder, but I think they can compete immediately for like a 7 or 8 seed with good GMing because that's that is the pace that they were on before the GM left the league.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'll be honest. I've never personally been a fan of the rosters that Andre has put together. To me, they always topped off at most that mid-tier level, and I never saw them as a contending team. So, and I kind of feel that way about this squad. There's nothing here that says contender to me. So, I would, again, kind of like with Philly, I would say, see how the team plays together next season. But then I would definitely look at making some trades and trying to see if there's some way that this roster can be massaged into a contender, because right now this team just screams treadmill to me. And, it's not going anywhere from there.
I guess one of the nice things about the teams that we've discussed so far and the Grizzlies are that they do hold their own picks. So going forward, even if the GM is still learning, they've got talent and they're not necessarily performing with that talent, that it's not the end of the world because they will get a lottery pick out of it, and that will only help because they'll acquire more talent. So I guess that's the positive in that the GMs, if you're watching this, you're coming in. If you're not sure of the engine, you're not sure of the new engine that we're going to move to, your first round picks are going to be so valuable because you can pick up possibly another really good player there if your team does drop into the lottery.
We have a great draft team, so do not trade your picks.
We do. And You know, we have a great scouting system, which is, you know, excellent, one of the best that I've ever seen in the Sim League, and you can really get excited about the draft in the
Agreed.
CSL and feel like you are actually, you know, drafting a player with a story and a background, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and though I haven't kept up with it myself, I think the evolved system that Rizzo is developing is going to be something that's phenomenal to see once he fully implements it.
I mean, how cool is that? We're going to have our own app for the league. Like, you know, thank you, Rizzo. That's amazing.
Yeah, it is truly amazing, and kudos for him for putting that together, because that's going to be such a great, unique feature for the CSL, and I'm excited to use that. And the final team that we haven't talked about is probably the one that has the biggest question marks out of the franchises that the GMs have taken over, and that is the New Orleans Pelicans, a team that had a GM come in. He was active. He tried to turn this team with very limited assets into a playoff team, you know, acquiring some talent where he could around Anthony Davis. It didn't quite materialize. The team kind of fought for the 8th position last year and fell away. This year they've fallen away even more, with Anthony Davis obviously getting that broken ankle a little while ago. Probably the toughest situation, do you guys think, for a new GM coming in? What do you do with this team? Limited assets, one of the best players in the CSL who is, you know, getting to his peak. Tough decisions ahead.
Yeah, we kind of got into the weeds in this the other day in the Facebook chat, and I mean, I think he's going to have around 26 million in cap space this offseason. Like, I mean, just find someone whose loyalty is low and their greed is high. That's, you know, at a superstar level, and just give them what they want, and hope that you can get one guy. And if you can get one, you should still have a little left over to maybe do a lower tiered max player. So I mean, I see there is a pathway to quickly rebuilding, but it wouldn't exactly be easy. And, you know, if you only get one player, you know, it's kind of like the situation that the Lakers are in real life. You know, if you don't get a guy 1 year, you know, do some 1 year contracts and roll them over, because these are fictional characters, and they're not going to actually get angry that they're playing on 1 year contracts. So, you know,
yeah, so true, so true.
Take advantage of that, and, you know, just you know, take the slow path. Like, I mean, he's under contract for 3 more years, and you basically have 2 years of targeting a max player to put around him, and signing guys on 1 year contracts that you can trade during the season for first round picks. Like, you know, that, you know, there's so much opportunity here.
Absolutely. I mean, Tim, do you have anything else you want to say in terms of the Davis situation in New Orleans? Do you kind of agree with that assessment? Is there anything you would necessarily look at?
Yeah, I mean, the financial situation is really what saves this from being a really painful scenario. Like JM said, and like I said this in the chat. I read this. I'm like, you know, just renounce everybody. Take your 20, you know, because the new GM was talking about, oh, maybe I can find somebody for Chandler Parsons. And I'm like, no, you won't be able to. He turns 34 next year. Nobody is going to pick. And, you know, if for all the new GMs out there, if you trade for a player who has a team option in the off season, during the off season, the team option is automatically picked up. You can't use it as a loophole to then suddenly give yourself 18 million in cap space. That was a loophole that was exploited in the NLL. So then that rule got instituted. A lot of us are legacy GMs from that league, so that rule kind of carried over. So yeah, I said just decline all the options, renounce everybody, go in with 26 million, and basically do what Jam said.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, whilst on paper this team looks like it's in the most difficult situation, it doesn't hold its own pick for 2 years. You know, it's a roster that's not really well put together. It's a bit of a mismatch. You know, you guys mentioned the saving grace is the cap space that they can generate in the off season, and I mean, just to give the GM. I mean, there's some guys who he could easily target who will be good for that period of time that Davis is under contract. I mean, I'm looking at guys like Eric Bledsoe from Oklahoma City. He could possibly try and snag because they're up against hard cap limits. I mean, you're looking at possibly Paul George from Dallas. You know, we mentioned the sign and trade. There might be something that could be worked there, possibly. I mean, you know, these are guys. James Harden is another one who screams out to me. These are guys who are, you know, at their peak, expecting a decline, who you could offer a 3-year max deal to, which would fit very nicely with New Orleans' kind of window that they have contracted for Davis. But stars who can instantly come in and lift this team up in the Western Conference and really help this team get back to where it should be, and that is in a good playoff position.
I forget where is Harden even playing now?
He's at Golden State, so with Durant.
Okay.
So you know that's an interesting situation. You might be able to snag him. Depends where Golden State wants to go in the offseason, because they've got other questions that marks around them as well.
So imagine this. Imagine they get James Harden, and then they use what's left to get, say Ricky Rubio, and then all of a sudden you have, 3 of the top defenders in the league in your starting lineup, and two-way. I mean, I'm sorry, not James Harden, but you have two of the best scorers in the league, and 2 of the best defensive players in the league. Like that's,
yeah,
you wanted to go that route.
Yeah, that would completely change the trajectory of this team. I really like that plan personally. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity in terms of the cap space, and with the new player agent system that's coming in, New Orleans a perfect testbed scenario for that GM to try and bring a star and a mid-tier player in with that cap room. So it should be an exciting offseason for that GM in particular.
And I know I've been openly wondering if the injury situation is different in the new engine, because people keep saying, AD's cursed, he's got the injury bug, but he's under contract for 3 seasons, and there's only 1 more season left under this, this engine. So
exactly.
After that, you probably have the highest rated player in the new game for 2 years.
Yep, and with the previous injury history essentially wiped out, so everybody starts fresh.
Yeah, exactly. You guys have explained it excellently there. Just as well, the other thing that would be exciting for me as a New Orleans Pelicans GM with Davis is going to the new engine, is you can actually build a system and a structure that's focused around him getting the ball the most to really be even more of an offensive threat than he is already. And that's going to be really fun to watch. Scary for us, but really fun if you're the GM of the Pelicans. Cool. So I guess, the new GMs coming in obviously are welcome to the league from us on the show here.
Yep.
And you've all got unique and interesting situations. You've all got assets. You've all got good talented players. I guess the other thing I wanted to sort of stress to them is patience. This is a league that the pace is fairly slow. So if you do make a decision and cash in every single asset you have and it doesn't materialize, you have a very long wait to turn that around again. And we've seen GMs in the past come in, trade all their first round picks, trade their best player for a particular rating or a particular player that they've always wanted, and it just doesn't work, and they get disheartened with it. And I guess my final shout out and my advice is take your time to learn and understand the engine, look at the players you've got, understand who are the good players, who are the bad players in the league, see how that all works. Talk to other GMs. They're always helpful in terms of giving you ideas or sharing what they know about the engine, about the CSL. That would be my kind of top tip is patience with these teams. I don't know if you two have got anything to sort of recap that you want to sort of shout out about to the new GMs that are coming in.
Segue question. Okay, so in terms of say you're a new GM and you get a trade offer, who would be the 3 GMs that you recommend that new person talk to determine the offer is fair or not?
In my experience, when I first came into the league, Tim, you actually are one of the people I I trust to give an unbiased opinion. I may not always. I think there's actually been many times you and I have talked through something and I've turned around and done exactly what I wanted to do. But still, like it's good to have someone to bounce ideas off of, because at the same time you've pointed out many flaws. Chris, actually, you as well. I personally have thrown ideas at you, and I'd have to say Marcos may be the nicest guy in the entire league, because he's in my direct division, and he's helped me quite a bit when I first joined into the league with player valuations, because I'd been in the NNL with you guys for years, but when you transition, the ratings are different. You have to reassess what which play, like what ratings work with in this pool of players, because maybe 90 players with a 90 scoring were coming in the league that you came from, or maybe players were capped at like 70. So there's an adjustment period, and I had a lot of help with that. So
Yeah,
those would be my three.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I've always spoken to you two about trades before, and opinions on players, and you both give me very honest opinions about different players in the league. I guess just to add, so obviously Marcus as well. As you said, he is the nicest guy in the league. He'll always have a chat with you about players and give his honest assessment, and that's always fantastic to have a chat with him about players. I guess the other two that I say are worth having a chat with, in terms of guys who will just be honest with you about their opinion. I guess Gary at the Washington Wizards GM, he's always interested in talking about players and will always tell you what he thinks, his opinion. And then obviously the commissioner, Mr. Miles, at the Denver Nuggets GM, he obviously is unbiased, because he always wants what's best for the league, and that is having GMs who understand players and understand value, and give you an honest opinion on deals and things. So there are lots of guys in this league I think you can talk to about different players and different valuations. I agree with what you guys said about some of the GMs, and it is an honest league, I guess.
Yeah, personally, I would agree with all the names that you guys listed. I would throw one more in there. Although he's not in the chat anymore, I would throw Doug in there. He's always really great to talk to about trades and suss out, is this worthwhile or not. He also gives really honest opinions and really valuable feedback as well.
For people who don't know, that's the Phoenix Suns GM.
Yeah. The GM who has got a ridiculous amount of talent at the moment. But
the team that every team has been modeled after since I've joined the league, because no one could beat them for the longest time.
Yeah, pretty much. So I guess great advice, Tim, in terms of talk to other GMs. I guess, Josh, is there anything else you wanted to add in there in terms of if you were coming into the league now as a new GM that is useful to know?
Scout and actually do the draft. Like, I know you want to come in and make the team into your image, and I did something similar. I remember when I came into the league, the reason I took the Cavaliers was because they had the number, I think it was number 3 or the number 2 pick in the draft. I can't remember which one it was. It might have even been the first pick. I early in the morning here, but I ended up trading that for a superstar, keeping the original roster, and then now I've completely turned the entire thing. 4 or 5 seasons later, like there's no rush. Like, take the time to actually learn your team and figure it out. And our draft process is incredibly good. It's the best one, as someone has said, that I've ever been a part of, and there's talent in there. So actually use this period to get to know everything and do some actual scouting. And if you only do it one time, do it one time to just to see what it's like and enjoy it, because I think they run a good program.
Yeah, it's great fun, the draft, and it's just the buzz around it as well. I mean, whenever we get to the draft in this league, you look on the forum, and like, there are, out of the 30 GMs that we have now, probably at any one time, you see all 30 online, and it's like, oh my goodness, what is going on? It's like, it feels like there is actually proper activity going on around draft time, and it is really fun to just watch. And when it gets to your pick, you have all that information to really feel like you're drafting a guy. It is fantastic, and it's only getting better. That's all I can say about that.
It's the one time of the year where all the GMs actually post articles. You have something to read. To at least 2 or 3 articles a day. It feels like it's just probably our peak period, honestly.
Yeah, definitely.
Great. So should we move on and talk a little bit about the race for the playoffs, I guess, in the Eastern and Western Conference? And I don't necessarily want to focus today on the top teams because we've probably talked about them quite a lot over recent episodes because they've been active in trades, or we've been talking about front runners for the championship this year. We all know who they are. We've all talked about them for ages. I kind of want to talk today a little bit about the guys who are still in the playoff hunt for the lower seeds, and who still have a chance. What our thoughts are. Do we think who's going to make it? And with not many games to go. So should we jump into the Eastern Conference first? And I've got 3 teams listed here who are kind of in that lower seeding place, who are fighting for position. To me, that sort of screams out that you've got the Atlanta Hawks, who are sitting at 39-31, the Brooklyn Nets at 38 and 34, and then you kind of got the Chicago Bulls, who are sitting at 40 and 30, kind of in that lower seeding position, really. What's your guys' take on it? Who do you think is going to make it? Who do you think is going to miss out?
Okay, so I can't see. I'm not in front of the computer, and I can't see the screen very well. So who's the number 8 seed right now?
So I believe that is probably the Atlanta Hawks, unless I've got that wrong. Sitting at 39 and 31.
No, I have a higher win percentage than they do.
Okay, so it's probably just you then who's in there.
Yeah, it's either me or the Bulls. Yeah, and I think they have the tiebreaker. So
okay, so yeah, so to give you context, it is the Cleveland Cavaliers sitting at 41 and 31, and then you've kind of got below that the Nets at 38 and 34, and the Hawks at 39 and 31. So there's only a couple of games that split them 3 and the Bulls really. So do you guys see the Bulls and the Cavaliers ending up in those playoff positions, or do you think the Hawks or the Nets could sneak in there?
Personally, go ahead.
I was just going to say I know personally I have my first string of home games that I've had all season, so I think that has the potential to help propel us to the playoffs. I'm definitely going to try to make the playoffs. So what I said earlier about having a potential lotto pick is, that's in the very back of my mind. I'm very competitive. That, and I think that I just need to figure out a system, and I think I finally actually done that, as I was telling people on the Facebook chat the other day. But for the most part, I think that Brooklyn, for some reason, they're just not clicking anymore. I feel bad for Rizzo. I don't think they're going to make it. The Hawks, I think they've actually won the series against me this year, so I think that it's going to be really close. But I just don't think that they're going to. I think that it's depends on how many, I guess, home versus away games they may have going into the final stretch. And the Wizards have been losing since they lost Milos, so that's something to look at because they're only 1 game from being in the same situation. So, I know they just beat OKC, but before that they lost, 2 games in a row that he'd been out, and they're going to miss his firepower. They're playing Memphis and Brooklyn, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, personally, I don't think Brooklyn has any chance of catching up. And the reason why is they've already got 34 losses, and they only have 10 games left in the season. So, Atlanta has 12. I think, I think like most other people do have, somewhere in that 12 to 10 to 12 game range yet. But having only 10 games left, that's only 10 more chances to make up ground. That's not going to be enough when you've already got 34 losses. So they're definitely out. Atlanta could sneak in. That's going to be very interesting. Like JM said, it's going to depend on their home away split, their level of competition, and always when you get down towards the end of the season, and we've already started seeing this with teams learning, and I hate giving him credit for this, but Andrew really kind of revolutionized the resting players earlier in the season. And now other teams are starting to do that. We're seeing Houston do that. We're doing Sacramento doing that. Um, so, if it, and generally speaking, those last 2-3 games at the end of the season, a lot of teams will just rest their best players. And so that can have an impact when the seeding race is this tight as well.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, it's the Eastern Conference is going to be interesting for that final seed, mainly because if I look at you, as you mentioned, Josh, yourself and the Cavs have got quite a nice little home run. The Bulls, just looking at their schedule quickly, a bit of a mix in terms of home and away, but they have been, actually resting guys, so they may continue to rest guys if they think they're safe. I guess the interesting thing for me is probably the Nets, and I'll tell you why. Because they've got to play Washington twice, they've got to play Chicago, and then they've got a couple of games which are winnable against the likes of Orlando, Charlotte, and they've also got to play Atlanta. So for me, in terms of the teams that are sort of fighting to get in, which are the Hawks and the Nets have the most realistic chance because they're playing teams that are around them. And if they can get those wins and just knock that difference down, they might sneak in. It's a tough ask, but I think the Eastern Conference could necessarily go down to the last couple of games. And as you mentioned, Tim, it depends on who's resting guys, who's already locked in for the playoffs. It depends what results happen there, and it could go either way.
Yeah, because I mean, if you look at it, Toronto's only 2 losses from being caught up in this quagmire too. So
yeah, exactly,
it's really close.
Yeah, I honestly, in the Eastern Conference, below the kind of top 3 teams, I have no idea how the seedings are going to work because it is that close, which is great. Makes it fun till the last game of the season. Who knows how that's going to pan out in the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, no, I was surprised when some of the new GMs took teams in the East because we have quite a collection of good teams now.
Yeah, good teams and lots of young talent coming through in the East as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if we take a look at the Western Conference to kind of finish up the episode today, for me, I've got 4 teams listed that are probably in that sort of bottom couple of seeds. They are the Minnesota Timberwolves, surprisingly. So in terms of the Western Conference, I should explain that you've probably got 6 teams who are, probably already more or less in the playoffs. Then you've kind of got a bit of a swathe gap between those in terms of the Minnesota Timberwolves at 33 and 38, the Dallas Mavericks at 33 and 37, the Memphis Grizzlies at 32 and 38, and the New Orleans Pelicans still with an outside chance, and it is an outside chance at 30 and 43. So I believe I'm right in saying, I'll double check, but I think the Mavericks are just holding on to that 8th seed at the moment, but it is very close.
Yeah, it's a tie between they're slightly ahead of the Timberwolves, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, they've obviously the Mavericks we kind of touched on earlier have been on a good run. Then they've been on, beating teams you would expect that Dallas to beat, really, given the talent they've got. I guess the surprising one for me is the Minnesota Timberwolves, a team that have been through about 4 different iterations of roster this year, who still managed to find themselves, even with a losing record, in with a shout of getting in the playoffs. I mean, it's going to be whoever's not the least worst, isn't it, going in for the Western Conference?
Yeah, I'm not sure the Timberwolves will make it because I'm not sure how often Roxy's been putting in depth charts, so that kind of goes against them. And they have the Grizzlies and the Mavericks now have GMs who are actively trying to, to win every single day. So I think that just might give them the edge to sneak in. I'm still honestly worried about the Utah Jazz because he hasn't fully utilized Kyrie, and they have a stretch of pretty easy games. I've been watching them closely, hoping that they don't catch fire because they need about four more losses.
Yeah. I mean, they are quite far back now, 27 and 43. It would be a very tough ask to see them somehow get through into the playoffs.
When
They are,
I had an above 700 win percentage with Kyrie, so I mean, it's possible.
it is possible. I mean, they need a minor miracle now, I think, but yeah, I mean, they have certainly been playing fairly well recently. I guess for me, I think the Mavericks will just nip in and grab this one. Despite obviously our conversation earlier about that, they might not be an elite team anymore, but they certainly are a playoff capable team. And I think they'll just nudge above the Grizzlies. And I think probably the Timberwolves and the Pelicans without AD and Utah just too far back, really. But,
Yeah,
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 it's been weird watching the Western race because it kind of has the resemblance of everyone's trying not to get that spot because all the teams that are tied for it have just been losing and no one's pulled ahead. It's kind of been weird to watch. I'm sorry, Tim, what you were saying.
yeah. I was just gonna say that we can scratch New Orleans off the list. Without AD, they do not have a chance. That roster is just too poorly put together by the previous GM. I should say previous GMs, um, because the last GM was also in a very hard situation, and he tried but couldn't get it going. Um, I think I think Memphis and Dallas. Wait, I think so. We're talking about both the 7 and the 8 seed, correct? Here, right? Or
Yeah,
just the 8 seed? Okay.
probably
7
7,
and
8
8.
seed.
Yeah,
Okay.
they're pretty
Okay.
close.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think Memphis and Dallas are the ones that get in. You know, uh, as much as Roxy manages to just about every season maximize his weird assembly of talent that usually isn't very good, and I think they're just gonna miss out. I think them losing to us the last game, I think it was, were 2 games ago, recently anyway.
Yeah,
Uh,
last game.
yeah, last game. Yeah, I love seeing that. I think that's really going to, yeah, I think that's really going to come back to haunt them, and I think that's going to be the difference maker that knocks them out of the playoffs when all is said and done.
Congratulations on Bagley, by the way. He Bagley looks like a stud.
Thanks. He's awesome.
Yeah, I agree with you guys on the Western Conference. I've just pulled up Bagley just to have a look. I mean, yeah, he is looking like he's turned into a fantastic prospect. Even at 19 years old, I mean, he's shooting well. He's putting up stats in all the right places you expect for a power forward. And I guess to finish on this episode, Tim, I guess you're really excited about him and pairing him possibly with another decent player coming into this draft.
Yeah, definitely. He's actually played center for us the entire season because I've kept Christian Wood at point guard, and depending on what we do in the draft, and if we bring Diallo back, there'll be somebody else starting at power forward next season. I have no interest in bringing Wood back. He's never wanted to be back here. So it'll be somebody else, and yeah, I think with and I think also that I'm gonna try and finally say his name right, Moutier. Uh, I think with the preference work that I put in on him this season, he's really going to start becoming the kind of player that he's truly capable of being, which is kind of that second, third starter who can score. Basically, I'm going to see if I can turn him into Kemba Walker without steals. And I think he's starting to make that progress this season with the preference work I put on him. So, what about you guys? Chris, you haven't said anything about your team this podcast. So, what are you thinking about Portland, both in terms of heading to the playoffs and in preparing for the off season?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for us, we're kind of since the trade of Horford for Tavares, we've kind of been middling ground, really. We haven't really been elite. We haven't really been terrible. So for me personally, we're kind of limping into this playoffs, which means we're probably not going to perform as well as we have done in previous years. I guess looking to the off season for us, the big question is obviously we have our franchise guy Marcus Smart expiring, so we'll obviously look to lock him down in the off season. We do have the option of renouncing some of these guys and freeing up a slight bit of cap room. I think at the moment it's about $8 million worth of cap room to try and bring another sort of second unit leader in. But we'll see how it pans out. I guess for me, I'm just excited to get to the playoffs and actually start putting some matchups together and seeing if we can make some noise as we have done the past couple of seasons. But I think this year will be the toughest one for us yet.
So right now, who would your first round opponent be if the playoffs were held today?
That's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. Let's have a look. So I think we're currently in the 5th seed, if I'm right. So who do we have? Possibly the Rockets, maybe, unless I'm getting that wrong. I don't know if you guys can see the standings at all, but I think it might be the Rockets who we might play.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Which is a tough matchup because I don't think we've beaten them all season because we can't compete with Kemba Walker and Karl Anthony Towns and Malik Monk. I mean, it's like a young version of OKC, really.
Well, Kemba is actually out until probably the Western Conference Finals.
Yes, true, very true. So we'll give it a shot maybe if we get there, but it's going to be tough. Josh, in terms of the Cavaliers, you're obviously playoffs. You mentioned at the beginning of the episode. What is your view of the team going into the playoffs in the off season?
Going into the playoffs, if I can manage to get them in, I think I have a lot of pieces to match up well, especially because the rotation shortened up and you have the opportunity to actually game plan and put specific players on certain people's if depending as much as this engine lets you do so. So as long as we can get in healthy and I can get my full rotation back, I'm hoping that we can make some noise. And if that doesn't happen, I will have 2 lotto picks going into this draft, and I hope to use those to give the team a quick turnaround. And I managed with my moves to sneak right under the line for the luxury tax, so I should be able to get my MLE and my LLE back this year. So it's 2 more tools I haven't had since my first season in the league to retool the team. So I'm excited with the player agents to try to talk a player into taking the MLE to join me, because I mean our recent winning history has been pretty good.
Yep.
Yeah, exciting, and you've got some interesting players, and your matchups in the playoffs are going to be interesting because you've got Peyton now, you've got Curry, you've got Griffin, you've got guys who can perform well in the playoffs. So I'll be expecting you guys to certainly make some noise in the Eastern Conference against some of these elite teams.
Yeah, I really think Cleveland is going to be the matchup that nobody wants to face. Because that's just going to be scary. Chicago has had injury problems, and so I mean, for Chicago, who all is injured to at least the first round of playoffs?
Let me check. So it's probably Markkanen who's out for 38 days. Everyone else should be back by that time.
Ooh, if Chicago can get out the first round, that is a bad matchup for everybody.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, they've just got Lillard back, which is a brilliant bit of news for Marcus, certainly, which will definitely help them going into the playoffs. Yeah, it's going to be interesting in terms of the playoff runs that we've mentioned. In terms of matchups of the playoffs, I'm excited to see particularly how the Eastern Conference pans out, because that is story worthy, some of those matchups that could happen there. And yeah, of course, we talked about the new GMs, and it's great to have a full league, and looking forward to seeing how they do in either playoffs or in the off season. And as always, guys, it's been great to have you both on the episode, and best of luck with the rest of the season, be it playoffs, be it lottery balls, be it drafting, off season, signing players. Great to have you on, and best of luck.
Yep,
Well, thank
great
you.
to
It's
be
been a
on.
lot of fun.